Okay, let's start. First of all, welcome everyone and welcome to the International Hospital Federation and the Congress that we are placing these days in Barcelona, and especially to this parallel session that is hosted by the Barcelona Institute of Oncology, an institution of cancer research in Barcelona. And this session, as you will have seen in the program, will focus on the potential opportunities, on the real opportunities and challenges that we have on clinical research and translational research as drivers to promote sustainable and rapid access to innovation. I think that now, more than ever before, facing the situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, it is widely and clearly documented how important is to translate major fundamental advances in biomedicine into better preventive actions, but also diagnostic and therapeutic opportunities for our patients. And it's very clear that over the past decade, in particular, health research institutions globally have continued to join forces with academic hospitals and universities, also non-profit university foundations, as we will see, and in partnership with many other stakeholders to lead this translational research paradigm by bridging basic research to clinical research and access to innovation. At the end, what we want is to foster these advances to our patients, but also at the same time to promote sustainability of our health systems. Illustrative on how this marriage can expedite advances in healthcare and access to cutting-edge technologies. We have a panel of speakers. The first one is going to be Dr. Antoni Plasencia, who is the Director General of the Barcelona Institute for Global Health, ISGlobal, who will present on the progress in the field of global, environmental, and infectious diseases. Later on, I will highlight just some of the success that we have in the field of cancer research, and how we translate this to our patients. And finally, Dr. Angel Forn, who is the Corporate Director of Research and Health from La Caixa Foundation, will discuss the contribution of a philanthropic organization that supports clinical and translational scientific and health-related research on diseases. So I hope that you will like the session, but of course we would like very much to have your interaction. So for those of you that are here in the room, you can raise your hand and assistant will help you with the microphone, and you can ask questions either face-to-face, but also for you and also for the attendees that we have virtually, we will have the option of having questions by the remote system. So as you wish, but I hope that this will be at the end very interactive. So without any further delay, I would like to ask Dr. Antoni Plasencia, who is going to be presenting us this aspect of clinical and translational research more related to the global health. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josep. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you a few thoughts. Thank you to the organizers, and especially to La Unió and to the Barcelona Institute of Oncology for this opportunity. And thanks you all, both in person and virtually. I will cover the issue of partnerships for clinical and translational research from a global vision, and that's at the core of what I will be discussing. And I will be doing this from the experience of the Barcelona Institute for Global Health, ISGlobal, which is a foundation, a public-private partnership aimed at research, but also translation and application of knowledge from a global perspective. And this is the result of, I would say, the commitment, the virtuous commitment, I should say, of a number of institutions, namely the La Caixa Foundation, but also of two teaching hospitals, Hospital Clínic and Parc Salut Mar, their affiliated universities, Universitat de Barcelona and Universitat Pompeu Fabra, and three levels of administration, the Spanish administration, the Spanish government, government, the Catalan administration and Generalitat de Catalunya, and also the city of Barcelona. All of them, from their different responsibilities, the different missions, the different constituencies, agreeing on supporting public health, global health research and translation, as I will briefly explain. So I will introduce a little bit about ISGlobal, also about globalization and healthcare challenges. Also, I will briefly cover the knowledge and technology translation for global health, and I will end talking about partnerships for global health innovation and some examples based on our current experience. So, regarding ISGlobal, as I was saying, ISGlobal is the result of acknowledging something that maybe with the COVID pandemic is easier to grasp and to accept and to practice, I should say, like the fact that in a intensely interconnected and closely interdependent world, health needs to be addressed globally. And so therefore, research and development aims at understanding the health problems and finding the solutions for problems that transcend geographical and political boundaries in an interdisciplinary and integrated way. And this relates to big, large, significant problems like the four groupings that are here: poverty-related and neglected infectious diseases, emerging infections and the growing epidemic of antimicrobial resistance, and COVID-19 would be in this category, non-communicable diseases which are emerging very significantly throughout the world, cardiovascular, cancer, diabetes, and so on. And of course, we need to put in the picture, also in the health picture, environmental health hazards, including climate and uncontrolled rapid urbanization. And needless to say that these days, with the Glasgow meeting, clearly the issue of health and climate change and climate crisis is at the core of some of the discussions. So as an organization, we foster collective intelligence to help solve health and equity problems, and this we do basically through research and translation based on our knowledge model that has three main pillars. At the core, the research and innovation pillar aimed at knowledge creation and transfer, but also understanding that research and innovation in itself doesn't necessarily change things. We have a policy and global development pillar that aims at bringing scientific evidence and opportunities for innovation to policies, in this case, to policies and to their application in the field. And finally, education and training in conjunction with our teaching partners. And I won't expand on these, but we have three main areas of research: malaria and other infectious diseases, maternal and child health, both from an infectious disease standpoint and from an environmental exposure standpoint, and also urban health, climate, and non-communicable diseases. And we have, through the Severo Ochoa, which is an accredited program from the Ministry of Health, three methodological areas strengthening the previous ones, relating with data science and big data, with health impact assessment, and with e-health and exposure assessment. In summary, our recent numbers from the past year, we are now a little bit more than 500 people from 40 different countries, with 200 ongoing research projects. That means mostly competitive projects yearly. About a little bit, almost 600 scientific publications yearly. We train about 700 students in different programs, and we have about 50 to 60 PhD candidates, and yearly about 22 of them defending their theses. We also are involved in the generation of, as I said, translational knowledge from a policy standpoint. And our budget is this year is going to be a little bit more than 35 million euros with this local presence. And I'll just like to mention here, our headquarters are in Barcelona, but we also have an office in Madrid. And these are the countries where we are currently leading research and translation projects. And I just wanted to highlight, because I'll go back to that, these countries in reddish, I should say, color, Mozambique, Morocco, and Bolivia, where somehow our partnership model, for the case of Mozambique now, we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the establishment of capabilities for research and for translation and education in Mozambique, in what is now a fully Mozambican institution, research institution. And at a lower intensity level, we are doing also developing these long-term partnerships with the other countries that I mentioned. So this is in response to some of the challenges. Basically, this is a busy slide, but basically what it shows is on the x-axis the income for the countries of the world, and in the y-axis life expectancy as a summary, as a raw summary of health, and where we see this is quite largely spread out from countries in blue, that means African countries, around between 60 and 65 years of age of life expectancy at birth, to countries beyond even 85 years of age, most of them, of course, in Europe and in the developed world. But the significant thing, and this is largely what global health is about, is this equity gap of almost or more than 25 years. So depending on where you are born, this is what your expectancy should be. And basically what global health tries to do is acknowledging this, trying to bring, from an equity standpoint, to bring these countries in the bottom left to closer to the others. And I have to say that this is a challenge for many reasons that we will cover from the point of view of research and translation. Additionally, other challenges involve the settings, and we tend to think that the settings of vulnerable populations and countries is this one, but in fact, as I was just announcing, it's mostly this one. And the world is getting urban, and this urbanization is growing at a much larger speed in lower income, middle and lower income countries, as the right-hand slide shows. And as you know, the distribution of the burden of disease, so these are basically DALYs, the distribution of DALYs for these three groupings. In blue, the non-communicable diseases, in red, the communicable diseases, maternal and child health issues and nutritional issues, and in gray, injuries. And that's to your left, the low-income countries, to your right, the high-income countries. So definitely we have two worlds here, and we need to reconcile under the approach that I just mentioned, these realities. On top of this, and again, the COVID maybe is helping to understand a little bit what has been a long-standing issue in the area of global health, which is the need to pay more attention to emerging diseases from a One Health perspective, so beyond what is strictly human, but bringing in the picture also animal health. And of course, then came COVID and showed a little bit the weaknesses or the gaps regarding the incorporation of these challenges. And this, of course, impacts healthcare and access to care, and with the challenges of making healthcare sustainable and equitable in a context of ever-increasing costs of healthcare, both in developing and in high-income countries. and where the equity, not only in low-income countries, but also in high-income countries, when we look at the internally within countries or within cities sometimes, of the challenges of equity, with lack of human and financial resources to cover health needs, focus on the health industries to ever-increasing profits, lack of adequate infrastructures to deliver health care, lack of efficiency of current strategies, and lack of incentives for research and development for the most vulnerable populations and countries. So these are a little bit some of the contextual challenges that we have. And what I'll be talking now is a little bit of the challenges that moving from discovery through translation and development to implementation. So basically to ensure impact, which at the end of the day is what we all aim at. And that entails interdisciplinary global health research as an opportunity to turn products somehow of basic research and clinical translation into innovative interventions of global reach and relevance. And that's where knowledge and technology transfer are important. And this is a slide for those of you who come from this field that is familiar. So it's trying to bring closer the world of research and invention, the world of discovery, with all its specificities. I won't list them here. Closer to the world of innovation and business, where as a necessary condition to bring knowledge, new knowledge, to impact, closer to impact. And there's where innovation somehow feeds or contributes to bringing closer these two worlds through creativity, through analytics, through purpose, and through execution. And basically, to summarize that, innovation is to translate knowledge into prosperity, which requires not only, of course, individual talent, but also organizational commitment. Innovation beyond technologies is therefore the big accelerator, also in the context and the challenges that we're talking, because it can significantly shift the economics of potential solutions and the time for delivering them. Of course, that means commitments from the different stakeholders to raise science, technology, and innovation capacities. It involves not only public and social sectors, but also the private sector as a unique capacity to move quickly, to attract capital, to innovative solutions, and to drive innovation at scale. So these are a little bit some of the drivers of this process. Basically, this is what we're talking, this type of process when we're talking about knowledge and technology transfer. So let me finish with a few examples from our experience around research and translation, including innovation, and with some examples. So I'm going back to the previous slide with the 3 pillars where you see here that feed what we call our partnerships model. And our partnerships model basically include fair research, fair principles regarding research and translation, ensuring solid governance of our partners, working closely from the executive leadership standpoint, applying this 3-pillar strategy for impact, which brings research and innovation, healthcare, responding to the healthcare problems, not only the health problems, but also the healthcare challenges of the context where we partner with, and of course the component of education and training, and including capacity building of health professionals or of other research-related professionals and capacities. And that precisely has to do with strengthening the workforce and the infrastructures, and of course working with governance and communities. So these will be some of the, in a nutshell, some of these fundamentals of our work from this partnership standpoint. Let me just share with you a few examples here of innovations that are in the process that are being developed. One has to do with the use of VAR2-CSA serology, so it has to do with malaria, with trying to identify, based on our research with other partners, based on our research, trying to identify markers that can be useful for malaria in pregnancy diagnostic test, and this in partnership with different significant funders in the area of global health. Another example is and this largely we are doing this, of course, in African countries, and very specifically, or more specifically, or more centrally, in Mozambique, but also in other African countries. Now, if we move to Latin America, where, for example, Chagas disease, another parasitic disease, is very prevalent, and by the way, through migration, also many European countries are having to deal with the challenges of this chronic disease, the chronic consequences of the disease, and therefore, similarly, we are involved in finding, based on looking at Chagas biomarkers, and again, it's a chronic disease, so it can get very complex, trying to use that for point-of-care Chagas diagnostic tests. A third example, under agreements with companies, this is now done in Morocco, and basically what is trying to look at is basic on some research and some innovation development in the area of ultrasounds, trying to use ultrasounds as the first non-invasive screening device for infant meningitis. So for those of you who are clinicians, try to avoid lumbar punctures. And this is precisely what we are doing in different countries, including Morocco, to try to use this, to try to diagnose or screen for the potential meningitis through the use of these devices. And also the use of mRNA biomarkers to diagnose patients with pneumonia and other relevant and deadly disease in the pediatric population in many developing countries. So being able to develop simple and rapid point-of-care diagnostic tests are within the picture. And finally, another example of this, more geared towards somehow the interaction of professionals and travelers throughout the world, is an app, an application to be able to provide information and counseling in real-time counseling regarding information regarding the risks and the management of potential diseases. And this is done with different partners and hopefully will be soon in the market. And finally, because a lot of what we do has to do with, at the core of what we do, research is there. We are also designing and hoping to be able to share these innovations with others in the area of measuring, of bringing together geolocation, physical activity measurements, and the measurement of environmental exposure, especially air pollution. And this we're doing largely in Barcelona as part of our studies of environment and health, but also in India, for example, and in a number of other countries where the roles of environmental exposures and health are increasing. So now in the last part, I'd just like to go back to the issue of partnerships and incentives for public-private partnerships, also in the area of global health. And this is what my colleague, Joan Vigorra, who has, by the way, very instrumental in preparing this presentation. This is the 4S proposal, which is basically trying to share priorities between public and private, responsibility, therefore, sharing risks, and therefore also bringing the picture accountability, sharing information on the progress of R&D and pricing, and that has to do with transparency, and finally sharing wealth impact, which has to do with equity. And if anybody is interested, we've done from this approach, this 4S approach, we've done this applied to the case of COVID-19, and there's a small policy brief trying to link these principles with the biomedical research and innovation around COVID-19. And that entails also bringing in the picture incentives like access to publicly funded research, access to public clinical development resources and patient data, and also the purchasing power of the public sector, meaning that between the private and the public sector there are purchasing processes where some of these incentives can and should be more often used. Just to finalize, ISGlobal is part of is founding member of a network of European Global Health Research Institutes. It's called EGRIN at the top left. And with the objective of precisely bringing the agenda of global health research and translation closer to EU policies. And that's why the slides and the comments refer basically to the EU under the question or the statement why the EU and its member states should invest more in research and innovation in global health. And this is probably so evident that we don't need to remind it, but within a world, a global world where with competing priorities, I think it's relevant to share it with you as almost my final slide. So why investing? Because it contributes to European leadership in knowledge and innovation. By the way, this is not geared only towards the public sector or EU authorities and member states, but also the private sector as a key partner. So it contributes to European leadership in knowledge and innovation. It has positive effects on the economy, this we all know. It provides knowledge that can help improve the sustainability of healthcare and health systems because it contributes to global security. And this slide was made before, not a long time before, but at least a year before COVID. So I think we all know what this is about, but not only infectious threats, but also environmental and climatic threats. It provides information on the mobility of populations, a topic that has to do precisely with the news these days in Europe, in Eastern Europe, that it contributes to the guarantee of the right to health and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, because at least from a European standpoint, it's a shared responsibility due to not only our global interdependence, as I started, but also related with our European values. So in closing, I'd just like to bring this quote from a Nobel Prize in Economy from the 90s, so before the current century, from the past century, therefore, the train was the economic engine of the 19th century, the automobile was the engine of the 20th century, and innovation in the healthcare sector will be the engine of the 21st century. And this, or for this, with this, we cannot, of course, we have to make sure to leave no one behind. So again, research, translation, and partnerships are a key asset to respond to some of these global health challenges and to work for global equity. So thank you very much. I'll leave it here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Plasencia, for this very nice presentation on the scope and the vision of ISGlobal. And hopefully, in an area that that has been underrepresented during the last years, and I hope that this is going to change in the future. Now it's my turn. So my point of my presentation is going to be to defend how a cancer research institute, in this case, the Barcelona Institute of Oncology, is an example of a way to promote clinical and translational research. But at the same time, this leads to easier access of innovation to our patients, and at the same time, provide sustainability for the organization. No? And the first question that we may have, probably if we try to think about the mission and whether the institution needs to be created, actually I would ask myself three different questions. No? The first one is whether cancer research is a topic for research, number one. Number two should be whether we do need an independent research institute focused only in one area, this area of cancer, outside, let's say, a more global research institute. And number three is whether there are opportunities in public and private partnership endeavors. And I think that, our institution, perhaps it's a good model for that. No? First of all, the first question. Well, the first question is related to the statistics. We all know that, unfortunately, the cancer figures are increasing over time. In our country, we know that 1 of 2 men and 1 of 3 women are going to have a tumor during the lifespan. But also we know that if we compare the expectations on the numbers that we have in 2018, 2021, and we estimate what is going to happen in 2040, for example, as you have here in the numbers, we know that the numbers are going to increase at least by 33%, and we don't expect that this is going to go down until 2035, 2040, even with the best expectations if the lifestyle and other measures are incorporated to the human being. So first question, yes, cancer research needs to be more evaluated. The second thing is whether anything has changed over time, right? So obviously with all the revolution of the genomics, and especially with the human genome projects, we have realized that cancer is not a limited disease in terms of the annotation that it has. So, for example, several years ago, when I started my training period, my residency, we only had 1 type of colorectal cancer, 2 types of breast cancer, and 2 types of lung cancer. Right now, actually, this is not the case. So, for example, in colorectal cancer, we have up to 10 different types, the same for breast cancer, the same for colorectal cancer, for lung cancer, sorry. And this is based on the precision evolution on diagnosing our patients with different subtypes within these very big malignancies. And of course, this provides the point to incorporate what we call precision medicine or personalized medicine in our patients. I have to say that perhaps the area of cancer has been fortunated because most of the investments that we had with the genome projects after the evaluation of the normal genome were immediately dedicated to cancer, and this now we are seeing this in other areas of diseases. No? Let me talk about our institution. So our institution is based in a general hospital, as you will see later on. The institution was created as an independent entity in 2007, but since the late 90s, actually, the clinicians and investigators that were especially focusing on cancer thought that it would be really important to create an excellent assistential setting for cancer care, not only on medical oncology, but all the areas of cancer care, but at the same time create an institution that would focus on translational research. And the word translation, for example, in translation research in 1997 was not really very well based. It was really new. So translational research means to promote the transition between basic research to clinical research, and therefore innovation for our patients, and have, at the end, completing the cycle, the best diagnostic and management care for our patients. So this is what we did, and actually one thing that you have to do when you start an institution also is to focus on areas where you can be competitive, because the field is really very competitive, at least in the cancer field, so it was really very important to define areas where we could be competitive. Of course, we are based in a hospital campus of a very big hospital, Vall Hospital, so we have a huge number of patients with cancer, so we should take advantage of that situation. That's why we focus on having better preclinical models with the collaboration of patients, just to get what we call humanized models, because this is indispensable in order to promote good preclinical research. Otherwise, if you have research based on old existing cells that are safe in the lab, that expire in the lab, the results of those experiments are not really very important. And for what? Basically to understand a little bit more how new drugs, new therapeutics work, whether they have sensitivity or whether they have primary resistance or secondary resistance, just to promote better options for our patients. Number 2, of course, we have as mentioned, many patients with a complete annotation of the genomics, proteomics of the disease, and at the same time the clinical characteristics. So it would be really very important to compile all this data and to help to subclassify major diseases, as I mentioned before, and we have contributed in seminal papers for the classification of colorectal cancer, breast cancer, and lung cancer, among others. So this is what we call big data. And number three, more related perhaps to the therapeutic field and to the diagnostic field of our patients, just to promote a clinical research program that at the beginning was, as many other institutions, more focused on phase 3, phase 4 clinical studies, but right now, actually, it's more focused in innovation, what we call phase 1 and phase 2 studies, but also at the same time to have opportunities to co-develop at the preclinical setting many new therapeutics. And finally, and this is more recent, obviously with the revolution of the knowledge of the immune system and the immunotherapeutics, we have also been involved in this field, especially with advanced cell therapies, and also one thing that is really very important, and we realize more and more that the microbiome merits all our attention, not only in cancer, but in many other diseases, as previously mentioned. Another important area is cancer prevention. We were not strong in cancer prevention research, but actually this is something that we are facing right now, especially in collaboration with other institutions like, for example, ISGlobal. So, as we were in a hospital, and our mission at the end was to better diagnose and to better treat our patients and to prevent as much as possible cancer, we needed a screening program, and this is what we implemented back in 2008 for all our patients with advanced disease. So we look at the full evaluation of the genomics of the disease, more than 500 genes right now, and we do this in a rapid manner because we have to take decisions for patients. So this was one fundamental pillar of our activities. Another fundamental pillar, as mentioned before, was to have these humanized models that clearly replicate the tumors in the human being in the animals. And this is really very important to translate any advantage, any knowledge from the basic research to the implementation in the clinical setting. So with all these aims, actually, we realized about two big problems by the year 2000, 2002, right? The first one was that we were facing, a long duration financial crisis in many countries. So it would be really very difficult to start a new research center if you didn't have a good business plan that promotes sustainability. And number two, working within a research institute that is global, as the one that we have in Vall, the Barcelona Institute of Research, actually limited our opportunities to get competitive grants, competitive funding from the most reputed agencies that are actually very demanding. So the support that we did have on that institution was very limited by historical reasons, but also at the same time there was a financial situation that I mentioned before. So that was a decision by 2004 whether we could create an independent institute, and this is the Barcelona Institute of Oncology, that had two characteristics. First, that it would serve only to areas of cancer, all areas, so very focused on one theme, one big theme, by the way, but focus on one theme. And the other thing, important action was to incorporate private patrons in our work with the public patrons. And actually, this helped us to build many capabilities, including a building. And this is what we did. So just at a glance, for you to have some numbers of our institution, the hospital is a public hospital, actually owned by the government, a university hospital as well, and it's a referral area of around 450, 550,000 patients, depending on the different diseases. But what we created since 1997 was what we call a comprehensive cancer center. It means that within the hospital, we have very well-defined areas that relate to cancer. Cancer prevention, cancer diagnostics, cancer therapeutics, and cancer care, including also patients in a terminal situation, right? So right now, actually in VHIO, we have more than 450 professionals working with 26 independent research groups. One of the important things, as I mentioned, we are really very focused on clinical research, and we include between 1,400 and 1,500 in therapeutic clinical trials, our patients in therapeutic clinical trials. And this, if you see the population that we treat, that it's around 3,500 or 4,000 patients actually corresponds to 30-35% of our patients that are included in clinical trials. So this is a number that no other institution in the world has in these numbers. And the reason for that is because the network works very well in our setting, but also because there is a full commitment of all the professionals of our institution on the mission of VHIO, so to promote best diagnostics and best therapeutics for our patients. And in this time, actually, we have contributed to many new drug indications by FDA and by EMA, but also as we do other kinds of research, especially preclinical and translational, as mentioned. We are involved in many international projects, and actually we lead some of them. And also we publish, as expected, in high-quality journals with a good impact factor. But also we have done transfer, even in these 14 years of life, we have promoted as much as possible transference with the inclusion of patents and spin-offs. So the key success of the VHIO process, probably the most important one, I did mention that before, is that the full organization, all the members of the organization are fully committed to the mission. And this is very important. So if you want to create something and you want to make it sustainable and you want to make it competitive, everyone has to be committed. No? So some of the key factors that actually help us, for example, was to establish what we call task force, transversal task force, that could involve all the professionals that are either taking care of cancer patients or at the same time investigating about that and trying to build opportunities coming from the questions that we have to from the patients just to present and deliver some research projects. So this relationship between the clinicians and the investigators in the lab, in the wet lab, is fundamental. The second one perhaps was to publish in the best journals that we could. Now it's the time that it's well knowledge that it's not important to publish. The important thing is to publish in good quality journals because in a way they represent that you are publishing breakthrough discoveries that are important to patients. It's important also to have a structure that it's prepared to get competitive scholarships and grants. This is fundamental. Also to establish important alliances, so always commit with the best in the world in that particular field. This shouldn't be seen as an arrogant message rather than trying to build the best opportunities for success and for sustainability. Important to transfer, as mentioned before, and we have some stories of that. And also have, in our particular case, having leadership in clinical trials, especially those related to more the early clinical development, was fundamental at the time that we did that decision. Just a couple of words about the public-private relationship. When we started the institution, actually the majority of the patrons were from the public sector. Right now, actually, they are from the private sector. So the way that we work is according to the private governance. It does not mean that we are a profit institution. Of course, we are a non-profit institution. But with the help of the public trustees and the private trustees, actually, we have been able to create the model that we have with the equipment that we have and the structure that we have. So we have representatives of the government of Catalonia, of course, the CEO of the hospital, the CEO as well of the other research institute, because the collaboration is really very strong and with an excellent relationship. Actually, we do many things together. But also I have to mention that without the private trustees, we wouldn't be here, without any doubt. So we are very thankful to the help of the Fundació La Caixa, and I think that Dr. Font later on will make some remarks on that, but also to some other foundations that provide us structural funding and also projects, like, for example, the Ferro Foundation, the Foundation Celets that actually built building for us, for our research, and donated it to the Catalan health system, and finally the foundation of Banco Bilbao Vizcaya. So one way question about the finances. I think that obviously this is not perhaps something that we should go in detail. But the point that I want to make is that on the year that we started, actually our budget was 1/3 of $1 million, right? So we started with 1/3 of $1 million. And if you see that institution and the members are fully committed to the research, actually you can get funding from many different sources. So if you focus, for example, on 2020, actually you can see that a huge part of our funding, well, it doesn't work. Oh yeah, but it's difficult to, so you can see that this is based on clinical research, this is based on independent goals, projects, as you see, and this is based on other services that we do. So importantly that if you have, the whole structure thinking on the opportunities, actually you can do your best. And the amount that we are provided by the government, it's less than 5% of our budget in 2020, and actually this is the case in the last years. An important thing is that the institution is very efficient. You can see that 85% of the budget is dedicated to research, either directly to consumables and to persons, or entirely to the research structure. So only a limited percentage of the budget is dedicated to general structure or administrative structure. The organization, well, about the organization, I would say that as any organization, as you have private and public patrons, you need a board and a board of trustees and executive committee, but we have divided the areas of research between the more wet lab based, so this is preclinical and translational research, then we have some clinical research areas, and finally some core technologies. Also, as you increase as an organization in the budget, you can increase in the number of persons. But again, another message mentioned before is that the 450 people working at VHIO are very committed to the mission of VHIO, as mentioned before. So you can see the numbers. The numbers of people have increased over time. But again, most of the people is dedicated to research or to the research structure. Just for you to show some faces, I'm not going to go into the details, but we have investigators in the lab, and you may see that the title of those areas of investigation is very related to questions that we have coming from the patients with a very translational esprit. So we don't do basic research. There are other centers that do basic research in the Barcelona area and in the rest of Spain, and actually we have good collaborations. But our programs are very much dedicated to the questions of the patients. Also, we have the clinical research program. Perhaps another advice here is that it's instrumental that the person that leads, the investigator that leads one particular tumor type program at the same time leads the clinical care program. Otherwise, this is not going to work. And this is what we have created. We have identified the right persons for directing that, and this is something that works very well. And finally, as mentioned before, I mentioned that core technologies are important, especially in our case, genomics, also molecular oncology, and bioinformatics is really very important. And what do we do with this? Many things, of course. Innovation for the patients. This is our main scope on the mission, but you have also to look at some more objective metrics. For example, scientific outcomes. You can look that in the number of publications we have increased over time, but more importantly, on the quality of the publications. 75% of our publications, around 75%, are published in the first quartile, and this is really a good number. And you can see that the impact factor, the absolute impact factor, is increasing over time. Even in the year of the pandemic, actually we did better than in the previous year. And we publish in the journals that it's expected that we publish. The most prestigious journals from clinical care, like New England, Lancet, and others, but also in journals more dedicated to translational research, like the Science or the Nature journals. Grants are important to be independent, otherwise you are going to be dependent always on the structural budget. And you can see that our success rate of grants that we apply is around 30%. And again, this is a really good number. Most of the institutions are, around 15% or below. Finally, I didn't mention, sorry, that actually we have parity. Gender, it's a new institution, of course, and it may be easier to do that. But 50% of our principal investigators are women. And in the case of clinical research, of course, this number is even higher, up to 70%. But also at the level of the different levels, so going down at the level that you get you get grants, at the level that you create patents, spin-offs, it's the same, right? So very similar percentage. Important to have international collaboration, as mentioned before. This is key. So we had the huge opportunity, the great opportunity to be part of Cancer Core Europe. This is a network of cancer centers, one for each country in Europe. Now we are a total of 7, and we have been lobbying to the European Union. Also, we have had grants on that. I'm going to mention that before. We're also funding members of the WIN Personalized Medicine network, and also foundation members of the EuroPDX, that it's a collaboration between international institutions for promoting these models that I mentioned before, the patient-derived xenografts that are fundamental for this kind of research. Cancer Core Europe, this is an European alliance for excellence in cancer research. You can see the centers that we have in the network: Gustave Roussy in Paris, the Netherlands Cancer Institute in Amsterdam, Cambridge University, also the Karolinska, Heidelberg, the IKF and finally Instituto de Tumori de Milan. Interestingly, all these institutions have between 50 and 150 years of history. Naturally, we have 14 years of history. But we are very happy about this collaboration because you can learn a lot about other institutions. We are very active, especially in clinical trials and in the areas of radiomics and genomics. Also, we are leading many international projects, either funded by the European Commission through the Horizon 20 programs, but right now also the Horizon Europe, and of course also programs funded by other independent organizations like Cancer Research UK and EURTC. And finally, also we have important collaborations with pharma and biotech companies, not only at the level of clinical trials, but we do also projects at the preclinical level, and this has been really very successful as well. Clinical trials is one of the main areas of our outcomes. As mentioned, we visit on a yearly basis around 5,500 patients at the medical oncology department, only solid tumors. Out of these patients, around 3,500, 400 are treated systemically. And when you see, and this is the data that you should have in the denominator, just to compare our activity. Again, when you have an institution that is focused on the mission, one single mission, one thematic mission, then you can grow a lot. You can see the number of clinical trials that we had before we created VHIO, and at the time that we created VHIO, this was rapidly expanding, including not only trials, mainly in the solid oncology field, or solid tumors field, but also in the hematology area and the radiotherapy area. But importantly, it's also to see the degree of innovation. As mentioned at the beginning, we were equally doing phase 3, phase 2, phase 1 studies. Right now, actually, we have dedicated more our activities to real innovation, and this is phase 1 and phase 2. And these are the first 2 bars that you see on each column, and you can see that the number of trials is increasing. But the important thing is not the number of trials, the number of patients that you include in those trials. And again, for this, you can see the numbers that we have been increasing over time from 250 back in 2020, sorry, in 2000, and right now, a very constant number, even in the year of COVID, with around 1,400 or 1,500 patients included in these clinical trials. And again, if you look then at the number of patients included in more innovative trials, phase 1 and phase 2, you can see that those are the more relevant ones, right? Another important thing to defend that clinical research is sustainable is to show by numbers how much the national health system, in our case of our region, save budget from drugs that are incorporated for clinical trials to the patients, either by an academic group or by pharma companies. So if we had to charge all the drugs that we used to treat our patients in the medical oncology service in 2020, would have charged around 50 million euros only for innovative drug medication. I'm talking about commercialized drugs. But actually we only charge, or that can be seen in different ways, but in a way we charge less than half of that, 23 million. Actually 27 million were brought by the by the promoters, either, as mentioned, academic partners or pharma company partners. And this is only the commercialized drug, because the non-commercialized drug has not any price. Finally, a couple of words on technology transference. In this period, we have created 26 patents. Only one has been abandoned. All the others are in different process of transference. And at the same time, we have created 3 spin-offs. The first one, Mosaic Biomedicals, that develop, as the second one, peptomic new therapies for cancer patients. The first one has been able to sell some of the compounds already to pharma companies, and now we have revenues from that investment in our institution. So again, this is a model to promote sustainability. Finally, you have to compare with other centers. So in this graph, actually, we compare the size of the budget of different institutions here and around the world, the number of publications in the y-axis and the median impact factor in the x-axis. You can see that our institution is competitive in the aspects that I mentioned before, but also we have had a good evolution over time, and this is also very important to promote. Another important thing when you try to find sustainability is how your capabilities to have funding coming from other sources, not from the public sector. Our average multiplication level from €1 of public investment is 28 euros coming for either the private sector or from competitive calls. So these are really important. We are well recognized, not only with conventional accreditations for a research institute, but also at the level of the care, the quality of care. We have been considered the best medical oncology and hematology services by KPMG, that does an accreditation process, reputation index on a yearly basis. And this was since the very early beginning. And finally, the European Union granted us, through the European Alliance for Personalized Medicine, as the best center for personalized cancer medicine in Europe. Also, something that I'm really very defending is that we have to open to the society. It's very important that we defend that research is the only way to promote a better health status, not only therapeutic and diagnostic, but also prevention. So it's very important that we do activities to the society, especially, to the young population. We do many activities with students at primary school, secondary school, elementary school, but also at the level of the university. And also we do activities with other stakeholders that promote as much as possible research as a driver, as an engine to promote a better health status. And finally, also we do crowdfunding activities that are especially important to promote the interest of research in our setting. So this is my last slide. I have to thank, of course, as I have done in my presentation, to all our staff. So we have very motivated people committed to the mission of the institution, and this is really important. Of course, our patients, they are very generous in multiple areas, participating in clinical trials, donating part of the tumors, among others. Also to our institution that has led us to grow in this way and trusted us from the early beginning. The national and international funding bodies, of course, without them, we wouldn't have done anything at all. But especially, I think that, as I mentioned, one of the key points was the private public collaboration. I think that we have to be really very thankful to the private foundations that have supported us, as I mentioned during my slide on the patronage, and one of them is also here to present such kind of collaboration. So thank you very much, and again, I hope that you will have many questions, and we would love to have interaction in the Q&A time of the section. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the final speaker, who is Dr. Àngel Font, as mentioned before, the Corporate Director of Research and Health from La Caixa Foundation, who is going to present us the ways of contribution of philanthropic organizations, and especially in this case, Fundació La Caixa, with particular focus on biomedical research. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, and thank you, Dr. Tabernero, for the invitation, the presentation, and the Barcelona Institute of Oncology, and also congratulations for the organizers of the Congress, or this successful Congress. Thank you very much. And I would like to use my time just to explain something slightly different that has been said until now, that is to explain the role of the philanthropy in the research activities. Of course, something has been said, but I would like to highlight how we can interact, not just financing, but promoting the idea of a new kind of research. Probably you may know that La Caixa Foundation is it's an old institution, but at the same time it's quite new, because the current configuration of the foundation was set up just 7 years ago in 2014, sorry. And in that moment was the configuration was set up by the split of our former savings bank, Caixa de Pensions, into two different organizations. One was the foundation, and the other was the commercial bank, Caixa Bank. Of course, the foundation owns part of the stocks of the bank, nowadays around 30%, and has, of course, other investments. From that investment, we got the revenues to continue the philanthropic work. And the bank has become the bigger Spanish bank, as you know, Caixa Bank. But as I mentioned, we're quite new, but we're quite old, because we have more than 120 years of history, and also related with research and health. We have those history that I would like just to show you very, very quickly. If we go just 100 years ago, in that moment, our institution started having a contribution with the health system here in our society, especially with the Amparo Santa Lucia as a care home of treating blind women and girls. And in the same year, we started to work in the maternity clinic Santa Madrona. So this is the beginning of our commitment with the health, and afterwards also with the research, because in the 30s, we start working with the first private research center that we have in Spain, and we have in the city of Barcelona, related to TBC and tuberculosis. This is the main center that received the first electron microscope here in Spain. That was really in that center that was in that moment led by Dr. Chalabarder, one of the references in this disease. But having a big jump in the time, coming back in the 90s, we also in the middle of another pandemic that we had in that moment, that was HIV/AIDS. We had a strong collaboration with the Catalan government in order to set up, to create Caixa, one of the leading research centers on this field. Some years ahead, it was the moment for asking, initially for asking to the malaria disease and other infectious disease, and was the origin of the ISGlobal, as has been explained today. Afterwards was with the cancer, with the VHIO, and the other program that I would like to explain. But I just wanted to show that our commitment, that is quite new, and is quite also has a long history in front of us. But what's La Caixa commitment today? Mainly, we are trying to have two different missions. That is to deliver support, financial and technical support, to projects on biomedical research, but also in the innovation and transfer, as we have said, to different partners, to different centers, universities, hospitals all over Spain and Portugal. The ovarian scope is what we decided to split our our support, because it's where also the most of the revenues of the foundation came. So this is the first organization with this Iberian focus. Biomedical research, we have probably one of the most prestigious philanthropic call on research on health, both in Spain and Portugal, that has more than 300 projects on the way, and choosing every year new 25 to 30 projects, and yeah, and having more than 1,000 scientific articles published thanks to that support, and trying also to keep that commitment not only with the research, but to the transfer of this research to the society in the way of the innovation and in the way of transference. Also different calls that I would like to explain slightly, just to let you know how we work in that field. Mainly these two first areas are related to competitive calls. So we ask different actors, different hospitals, different research centers to present us project, and we, for a very, very competitive selection process, we chose what is considered the most important, the most viable projects. But we have another part that is what explicitly has been explained by my colleagues, Dr. Tabernero and Dr. Plasencia, that we are supporting strategically and fundamentally supporting research centers by the structural financing and the participation in the governance of the institution. As has been said, probably ISGlobal and obviously VHIO, the Oncology Institute in Barcelona, are our most important partnerships. Both of them, as has been said, with the Severo Ochoa Award, but also Caixa, as I said, and the Barcelona Beta Brain Research Center related to Alzheimer's disease, but also we have other collaborations with other national institutions like the National Center on Cardiovascular Research, CENIC, or National Center on Oncology Research, VHIO, also the other institutions. This is the way that we are doing. So both spreading our support through competitive calls and choosing very reduced number of strategic collaborations in center. Let's see some of that calls in order to let you know how we work. This is probably our most relevant activity, what we call it the health research call in our Caixa research program, and we try to find the best projects in different fields of research. That fields as neuroscience, oncology, cardiovascular, and other metabolic diseases, infectious diseases, and also a fifth field that is enabling technologies, supportive technologies in order to improve the fields of research that I mentioned before, neuro, onco, cardiovascular, and infectious. We found projects up to €500,000 euros for those projects who are promoted by a single organization, and that financing can be doubled up to €1 million for those projects that are promoted by a group of institutions. We are very proud to arrive to the conclusion that the competitive calls are the best way to disseminate and support science, because we think that this call has become one of the instruments to foster the science in Spain and Portugal. Of course, that a lot of effort has been done from the public sector, of course. A lot of effort has to be done also in the private one, but philanthropy has this capacity probably to emphasize, to choose the best, to try to do some tests. And we think with that result, we are trying to have these results. The key process is the selection one, because we choose only 5% of the project that has been presented, so it's a really, really competitive project. And I would like to highlight a collaboration that we have with the Portugal government, that in the real moment that we explain to them the way we conduct this call, that is specifically conducted by our facilities and our teams, they made just a revision on how we conduct the selection process, and they ask us to double our investment. So every euro that we invest in Portugal, the Portuguese government is putting another euro, and that allows us to have more than 5 million euros extra for the financing of this work. We think that is a very, very good collaboration, and we would like that other governments would try to make this the same option. Of course, we try to do it, of course, open to all the centers in Spain, but probably you can see here there are 3 main regions that concentrates 3 parts on 4 of our project, that is the Lisbon region, the Madrid region, and the Barcelona region. Within these 3 regions, 3/4 of the projects has been allocated, but probably it's because it's in these regions also where the maximum capacity of research is done in this Iberian Peninsula. It's very hard to read, but several high-performance institutions have been awarded in this process. Another call that I would like just to explain to you that is smaller in terms of the financing, but is for us very, very relevant, is a collaboration between 4 European foundations. Novo Nordisk from Denmark, Wellcome from the United Kingdom, Volkswagen Stiftung from Germany, and ourselves. And we chose 2 years ago the topic of the mobility within South and North, and the correlation between that mobility, people, that migrant fluxes, with the global health challenges. We think that we have worked together, the 4 foundations, trying to put all the technical teams the effort for having the same standard of evaluation. So for us has been really also a learning point from seeing another, and we are in the final point of this journey, trying to select the final 5 projects that will be awarded, and we are really happy to see that one of them will be from Spain. And let me say that if Dr. Plasencia allows me to disclosure, that it will be a project that has been presented by ISGlobal, and has been really well defended under the international panel. So we are really happy also with this international collaboration, because even in the philanthropy, we have to learn how to allocate better the efforts in these activities. As has been said, innovation is one of our challenges. Some people said that maybe, and I'm not sure if we can share that, but that some people said that probably in Spain we know how to translate money into science, but we don't know enough how to translate that science into money again. This is more or less what you have explained before, and we try to say our word on that process. We really think that philanthropy has a role in this innovation process. Of course, innovation and research has to be funded by the public sector. Of course, that the private sector, the pharma industry, and has to invest a lot on that. Our investment will be, if we compare the figures, it will be always very, very slow. But we think, and allow me to do that comparison, because my background is on chemistry, and I will see that our role has to be as a catalytic process. You know, it's a very little amount of effort, money, and technical support, but with that support, we have to allow the whole process, the private and the public investment, to be possible. We dream in that vision, but we have some experience supporting more than 131 projects now that has received grants from us, but they are just raising new money from this project, from this spin-offs. 25 spin-off has been built. We have invested a lot in mentoring, in expert advice, and in training, and trying to allow that project to become a reality in the market, and of course in helping people with the diseases. We have 2 tracks in this program. One, we call it Validate, that is just to have the very simple idea in the lab, and just to check if that idea has viability for the future. And we try to select 20 projects a year, and for 3 or 4 projects, we try to put it in the other frame, in the consolidate. That is, it's the last boost that we can send before that probably the pharma industry or the capital can be can enter in that spin-off. And also in this program, Madrid region and the Catalan one is the most relevant, the most important parts in the Iberian Peninsula. Back to the last point, that is the support to the research centers. We are very happy to have this constellation of stars that we consider that our commitment with Caixa and ISGlobal, mostly in infectious disease. Of course, ISGlobal is broader than infectious disease, as has been explained, but more or less as well. We have this establishment, Barcelona Institute of Oncology, of course, in the cancer area, and in the neuroscience, it will be the Barcelona Beta Brain Research Center in a partnership with the Pascual Margall Foundation. As I mentioned, we have other ones, but we really classify it as a less strategic, because just we respond to a demand of different institutions to collaborate with them and to have some implication in the board of trustees, but has not the same effect as the previous 4, where our role is really strategic. Just briefly to explain that this is not the only way that we have to support science, but in our fellowship program, that probably is one of the well-known, because it started 30 years ago, allowing Spanish students to have graduates to have the postgraduate experience abroad. Has also an opportunity also for retention and promoting a new talent in research through 2 very competitive calls. That is the postdoctorate one, we call it Junior Leader, and the PhD one, that is, we call it Infinite, and trying to retain talent here, and also to attract talent from all over the world to the Spanish and Portuguese centers. And I know that it's not exactly the same, but we try to also promote other science, and from our perspective, the social research is really relevant because of our origin. We were born just to promote social equality. This was the original base of our institution, so social research for us is also important, and we have also some calls on that. And finally, I have to say 2 words on our last dream, let's say, or our last projects. We are working in preparing and building a new institute. These smalls are some of the drawings of what this building will be. It will be close to our science museum that is called Caixa, and our idea is to complement our commitment with the 4 institutions that I mentioned, just to having a new facility that will allow to foster the research for the near future. And nothing else. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angel, for showing how philanthropic organization like la Fundació La Caixa can support many different research activities. So now we have, like 10 minutes for Q&A. I don't know whether any person in the audience has any question. We have hostess that can facilitate your interaction. Otherwise, I also asked to the virtual attendees whether they had any questions as well. In the meantime, if I may, I would start having one question for Dr. Plasencia. So you very well mentioned on how important it's having more global transversal research, especially in the area of global health, of communicable and non-communicable diseases. I was wondering, in your opinion, which are the main challenges that you face for that? I mean, challenges related perhaps to the funding. How do you fund at the same time high-income countries and low, medium income countries? Also, aspects like intellectual property, or even more, perhaps, more challenges related to the regulations, especially in doing clinical research, because regulation processes are highly different in these countries.
Thank you, Josep. Very briefly, I would say that funding and funding sources are really what drive a lot of what you're saying, including precisely some of the implications in terms of intellectual property and in terms of some of the regulatory components, even if they are not always very clearly stated in some of the settings where we operate. So it's interesting to know, I didn't mention that, but about, as I said, maybe it was in a slide, about 70%, 75%, between 75% and 80% of our budget is competitive. And of this 80% competitive, I would say about 80% is international, meaning that if you want to do research in global health in Spain, you need to go for money outside. That's one issue. And the second thing is that of our international funding, I would say that about 50%, 60%, depending on the years, is from Europe, and that's basically public, and it's basically the European Union in its different programs. Of course, Horizon 2020 is one of them, one of the most important. But it's also, there's an important partnership, which is the European EDCTP, Europe and Developing Countries clinical trial partnership, precisely, which has been developed. And by the way, we are doing advocacy to ensure that Spain is not stepping back in terms of ensuring INCA, not only in kind, but also cash, as one of the funding institutions. And the other, and it's important because for the global health landscape, still the international philanthropy, namely the Gates Foundation, other important foundations, of course, welcome, La Caixa, as was mentioned, are there and are covering an area that is not always very well covered from the European sources. So as I was saying, at least half of our international funding comes from the US, and that means significantly both private funding and also federal funding, which has other implications. So definitely the landscape, especially for neglected tropical diseases like the ones some of the ones I mentioned is not easy within the European context. And as I said, some of our institutions, both at the member state level, but also at the European Union level, trying to work at the Commission level, trying to work to raise the profile and the commitment of countries regarding these global health threats. It's very complex. We were just saying, when China was building in January 2020, when China was building hospitals of 1,000 beds in 15 days, it seemed like it had nothing to do with us, okay? And a few weeks later, it was there. So again, that goes to say that not only from a cognitive standpoint, but also from a real-life standpoint, in terms of the funding, some things need to be changed. And hopefully, there are good practice examples. We are just one of the different institutions in the European context that are trying precisely to push for that. And that includes, of course, bringing issues in contexts that are weaker in terms of intellectual property and in terms of ensuring regulations. But I have to say that really the landscape is strengthening and is evolving rapidly in the good sense, and we are there to try to contribute to this strengthening. Thank you.
We have one question from the audience. I think that Dr. Antoni Gilabert.
Thank you for this interesting debate. And I would like to know your opinion about the collaboration between health institutions here and abroad. And 3 questions. First, if could you validate from 0 to 10 what is our level of collaboration in health institutions at home? Second question is, do we think we have to promote more collaboration models instead of competition models, or just both? I don't know. And the third question is, what are the barriers to promote this kind of joint collaboration and go together to some projects, etc.?
That's a good point. I may start, but you can, of course. So I think that collaboration is key, and this is not a motto. It's trivial. So, as mentioned, the institutions are really very competitive, but it's also very good to define your scope of research. You cannot do research in all areas. You have to try to find the areas in its own institution that are really have an opportunity to be. To have a success rate, number one. Number two, I think that in international or in interdifferent institutions collaboration, it's fundamental. Not only because this has to be in order to promote the best research at the best time with the best time schedule, but also many granting bodies, including the European Union, the NIH, Cancer Research UK, La Caixa Foundation, as mentioned before, they ask for collaboration when you apply for competitive projects. So there is no way to do that. Because otherwise, I mean, in a way, it's just to promote the best efficiency in the research that we do. But also, at the same time, you promote that there is a validation and a quality audit within the centers, that it's implicit. It's not something that, well, it's something that you promote in the project, but and you state with a work package or a mission of the project. But actually, this is something that is done every day. And I have to say that, you know, in our case, for example, thanks to the Fundación La Caixa that is funding some of the institutions that Angel Font mentioned before, actually they have promoted seminars, courses, activities between us, and this has provided opportunities for collaboration. So I think that this is key. So first aspect, just to sum up, focus on particular areas, but of course collaborate with the others.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let me just add, in our context, if there is a challenge in collaboration or in greater interaction, is precisely with the industry, and in our area, it's additionally challenging because, as we know, there's somehow a market failure, because we're talking that a significant contribution of what research can bring to innovation and then to impact will have to be implemented in context where somehow business is going to be more complex. And there are some countries, and of course, largely where these interactions with the private sector. Let me just mention, I suggest that you have a look at the German strategy for global health, where innovation is at the core of that. And the Germans have understood, and by the way, they are now at the forefront within the European context of this understanding that it's also good business for Germany to be able to, in a loyal, in a fair way, to promote more collaborations with the research and with the innovation field.
Yeah, just let me add something that is, I think it's clear that all the challenges that we are facing are global ones, cancer or global health. No single institution can solve it. This is clear for all of us. Even the bigger one, even the bigger research institute in the world cannot do it alone. So collaboration is a must, and I think that we are here in Barcelona and thinking that, for instance, Barcelona area can become a biomedical hub. If we compare our capacities with other hubs in the world, we are quite small. So if we would like to become something at global level, collaboration among us, and especially international, is really needed. Of course, that it's not always easy because there are different topics, there are different institutions, but I think it's something that we have to promote, and probably in an institution like us, that we have the capacity and the privilege to see several of them and to analyze the strongest point and the weaknesses of each one. We would like to see more collaboration, and we try to promote it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question from the audience? No. If not, I would like to ask a final question to you, Angel. So you have not mentioned that, but you are also the chair of the European Foundation Center, meaning this, a huge organization that is the umbrella of most of the foundations, private foundations in Europe. The question that I have is whether there is a common view at this European level on how to disseminate this kind of collaborations, but at the same time also how to foster more private-public partnership collaborations.
No, thank you. No, yeah, European philanthropy is something that is growing now, and is growing the perception that we are a sector. Normally, foundations in Europe, probably in the States has been different, but in Europe, we trend to have a low profile because sometimes we don't want that more people ask for more support because we have no capacity. I think things are changing. Now we are trying to build this network at the European level, also to have more capacity to talk with European institutions and to have also to collaborate between foundations to have the capacity to increase our impact. And what we see in that public-private partnerships, that PPP that the Commission also is fostering, we are asking to add another P, that is for philanthropy. And we said PPP, because it's private, it's public, and the philanthropy is something that has to be taken into account. Philanthropy is the safest place between the public and the private because it's private initiative for the common good. And we would like to offer this platform as something to create new pilots or to create new safe spaces for different kind of institutions. And yeah, this is the way we are trying to do together in the European Association. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that we have come to the end. Unfortunately, there is a limitation of time, and there are other sessions that are going to start immediately. So I would like to thank, first of all, you for being here, and also the attendees that we have on the virtual mode, and also finally, of course, the speakers for their excellent presentations. Thank you very much.